Secretary Granholm, in the time since President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act and Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, communities across the country are already benefiting from historic investments in clean energy and climate resilience. In fact, right here in the District of Columbia that I represent, the Inflation Reduction Act is enabling the General Services Administration to upgrade federal government buildings from fossil fuel steam power to electric heat pump technology. The upgrades to the Ronald Reagan Building and the International Trade Center alone will strengthen our climate future and are expected to save more than $6.2 million in taxpayer dollars every year. So, Secretary Granholm, how are projects like this one transforming communities across the country?
We are very interested in all projects that are community-based, by the way, that reduce costs for people. And so whether it is energy efficiency or the generation of clean energy and giving people the ability to take control of their own energy future in partnership with communities and on an individual basis. So we are all in on all manner of efficiency and energy and supporting communities in doing so.
Both the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law are critical investments in our country's future. Within the first year of the Inflation Reduction Act's enactment, we added 170,000 new jobs in clean energy and climate resilience, with a projection of more than 1.5 million additional new jobs over the next decade. Secretary Granholm, how has President Biden's investing in America, in America's energy, created new jobs and opportunities across the country, including the energy sector?
Yep, to your point, so far it's about 800,000 jobs that have been created as a result of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, with the projection that it will be 1.5 million. We've created over 15 million jobs. Over 15 million jobs have been created since this president took office, more than any president in any term in American history. And part of that has to do with the focus on clean energy and the opportunity that it brings to employ people.
According to the Department of Energy, because of the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, by 2030, we are projected to cut greenhouse gas emissions by 40% at 2005 levels. It is also projected that clean energy electricity will account for 80% of the power generation by 2030, compared with 42% in 2022. In addition, President Biden's leadership will help families save up to $38 billion in electricity bills by the end of the decade. So, Senator Granholm, how have the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law enabled the Department of Energy to invest in clean energy and fossil fuel alternatives?
It's the statistics that you cite are so wonderful because they happen to be accurate, and that 40% reduction in CO2 emissions, it's actually 40 to 50% if you include what the private sector is doing and what other states are doing. What these laws have done is enabled both the federal government but also the private sector to really do the investments, because they contain carrots. And we're all about the carrots at the Department of Energy. So the grants from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act have created an environment where America has become the irresistible nation for investment in clean energy. We are the envy of other nations for having been so forward-leaning on creating jobs here. So it's a very exciting time for both responsiveness to addressing climate change, but also creating jobs in America.
I'm proud we passed the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and I'm thankful for the Biden administration's leadership in addressing the climate crisis and securing our country's energy future, and I yield back.
Chair now recognizes Mr. Biggs from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.